Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Mind and Body Podcast. I have Steve Hall with me, and I'm so excited for this conversation. Steve, welcome to the channel, man.
Thank you for the opportunity to come on here and chat and talk shop. I'm excited to dig into things. I know you said you're not a bodybuilder yourself, and that's not always the topics you cover. So I'm excited to put some bodybuilding onto your audience. It's my passion.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I have really enjoyed following your content, and some of the things I've been kind of sifting through, because there's been a lot of literature coming out, studies that have come out on hypertrophy, whether it's like lengthened partials, full range of motion, optimal range of motion. There's been times like, oh, wait, this study says this study says that. And there's been times where you've been kind of a voice of reason. And I've enjoyed hearing your content and even just kind of pushing back against a trend where it's like one new study comes out and everybody's like, oh, this is the sacred text that we all should follow. It's like, you're like, dude, it's one study. There's been tons of studies on this. We probably should kind of wait till we see additional studies. And I've always appreciated your balance, your maybe pushing back against a new trend, even in the almost kind of the science space as well. So you got the like gym bro space, and then the science lifters, but sometimes even the science lifters can be a little bit quick on a study as well. So I just have really appreciated that. But just a couple things about you for those who are listening in. Steve, you are the founder of Revive Stronger, and you're a WNBF pro natural bodybuilder. What was interesting to me that I didn't know until I got on your website was that you survived a life-threatening head injury at the age of 20, and bodybuilding was something that kind of helped you just navigate that. It was like something that was like, this is helping me recover. This is giving me a sense of, hey, there's a lot of things going on. I'm going to go train. And would you care to share a little bit of that story, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I often take for granted because I think people hear Revive Stronger and they just think, oh yeah, Revive, that's just like fitness and health. And they don't realize there's that whole backstory to that name. And there's a reason why I chose it in particular. And it was because, long story short, bodybuilding revived me stronger. I felt like it brought me to a place of feeling in control of my body, my life. And it became a huge passion from there. But to kind of draw it back, I guess I'll start. It won't be too long. I won't give you my whole life story. But I've always been like, I was always a skinny kid, but really into exercising. And I was pretty good. I was kind of that general guy who was like, I was pretty good at football or soccer, depending on whoever's listening. And I do like long distance, mid distance running. I was never the best, but I was pretty decent. Always very underconfident though. And I was bullied as well, which didn't help the situation. So I always shied away from sports because that's where like the jocks were and they would bully me. So I never took it to higher education. I went and did geography with business at university as an example. But there was always an undercurrent of staying on top of my diet, staying on top of training. And I've been lifting weights in the gym since 15. I'm now 35. So it's been 2 decades of lifting weights, which is kind of crazy to even say. More than half my life has been kind of in the gym. But at university, I tried loads of different things, but I continued to go to the gym. But one of the things I was doing was runs. And I had this kind of traditional circuit around campus that was 10 kilometers. I was very much like, you'll see this about me. I get very into something and I almost get obsessive and I hyper focus on it until that's like all I'm about. So with running, I had like my running proper like Asics running trainers on. I had like running shorts, the whole gear. I had my Garmin watch on, my heart strap, strap monitor, everything. And I know I could kind of press a button on my watch and it would have like a shadow of my previous best time. And so I could kind of run against that every time and try and beat. I'd always try and hit a PR every single run. So I was on this run and I could see I was on for a PR, but I had to, I'd only beat it by seconds every time. I came to some traffic lights and they were flashing amber and I just went for it without looking. I was just like, hey, they're flashing amber. I've got a chance here. Went, and unfortunately a van came and hit me. So yeah, from that, the short term was I fractured my skull. I got some scarring on my back that needed to be sewn up. But I was in hospital for maybe a couple of nights and it didn't seem too kind of bad at that point. But when I kind of went home, I then just one evening, I felt all sorts of wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. I kind of we had family over. I know it was like, I think it was around Easter or something. We had family over and they were having
Mhm.
dinner, and I just was like, I can't be part of that. And I kind of went upstairs, and I just remember like violently of the evening vomiting and kind of having sweats and feeling very out of control.
Mm.
So my parents took me to A&E, as any good parent would, and they're like, "What's up with this guy?" And they're like, "Hey, he's got like hyperatremia, I think it's called." And that's where basically your sodium levels are so low that you're almost flooding the body with water. You can do that if you just, like anything, the what's the saying, the dose is, the poison is in the dose, is the saying. So you can kind of have too much fluids and water and you can actually poison yourself. You can have too much oxygen, you can have too much of a good thing, and it can be bad for you. And here it was just a case of my body was holding on to water and not sodium, and so my electrolyte balance was out of whack, and that can cause seizures, obviously vomiting, and you can die from it if you're not careful to balance your sodium intake. Which is funny if you're talking about bodybuilding, because lots of people will know like bodybuilders do wacky things in peak week with sodium and water, and
Yeah.
bodybuilders have died from manipulating those things too heavily or using diuretics and getting rid of all their fluid and going into a really dangerous state. So
Mm.
yeah, I then was in hospital for maybe, I think it was around a month. I was in hospital for, where they were monitoring kind of my sodium balance, and they just really wanted me to be a certain number. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. A long time ago now. Like you said, it was when I was 20, 15 years ago. So they wanted me consistently above this number. But when I eventually came out of hospital, I was like I said, I was always this fitness person. I was going to the gym, I was doing these runs, and I just shriveled up. I lost a lot of weight. I barely had any weight on me in the first place, but I was, and you talk about evidence, like there's a lot of evidence in science suggesting how hard it is to lose muscle. Like you have to almost go out of your way. But a great way to lose it is barely eat anything and lie in a hospital bed. You're going to
Mm.
eat away at your body just generally,
Yeah.
especially if you're there for a prolonged time. So when I came out, it was a case of trying to educate myself on good resources for building back what I had lost. Kind of had it in my head that I knew there had to be a better way than what I'd approached it before. And so I came across like a fitness forum. That's how we used to educate ourselves back in the day. Were you on any forums back in the day, John?
Yeah. 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 I would kind of uh, join in, kind of catch the latest conversations. Yeah.
Like bodybuilding.com, were you on there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bodybuilding.com.
So
I was
that
there's
was the big
another one.
one.
I was going to mention one actually, and I was like, "What's the name of that one?" I just couldn't remember. So, but I was on
Yeah.
bodybuilding.com, but there was another one that was pretty prominent back then too. I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But you were on bodybuilding.com, I'm guessing, since you brought that up.
I actually was on a UK, it was like a UK supplement company ran a forum. So I was on like a UK version of that.
Yeah.
I did eventually find bodybuilding.com, but I was
Which
like in
they've
my own little
actually
like
kind of
UK niche.
brand wise, I feel like they've kind of seen a little bit of a resurgence, or trying to see a
Oh,
resurgence.
really?
Yeah, because
Yeah, because they died.
died out. I know the guy who bought the brand, bodybuilding.com. Um, and so he's been trying to do some work. Yeah, it's been interesting. Like some of what's coming out with bodybuilding.com though isn't really bodybuilding focused. It almost feels like it's kind of going a little bit more like general,
General pop.
like personal training fitness. That's like, I don't know if this is really optimizing for hypertrophy as much as like this will get you moving. You know what I'm talking about? It's just kind of like
Yeah.
it's good for most people. It's like you're moving, you're training. I'm happy for you, but I'm also like, why are you training that way? This is probably not the best way to train for
Yeah, they lost
building.
their roots.
Yeah, exactly. But I could have that wrong, by the way. But just some of the stuff I'm seeing. However, their branding, their communication, I feel like is a lot better. It's like, oh, maybe they're starting to see kind of
Cool.
a you know, the word revive popped in my head, but that's the name of your brand, but
Yeah.
revival of their own brand.
Don't blame you.
Yeah, but yeah. So you were
But
talking
yeah,
about forums.
yeah, so that's where I just started logging my progress. So there'll be forums you could upload photos, and like people would have their before and afters. People on there were like bodybuilders who were giving advice, and I remember getting meal plans off guys and training programs, and I was just following stuff on there. And that was like a step up from Men's Fitness or Men's Health magazines or the big
Yeah.
guy in the gym. So I kind of got a bit there, but it still wasn't like scientifically backed or evidence based or anything like this. So I started seeing some results, but I did so much wrong. I did like your extreme like keto warrior diet where you'd like just go carnivore during the week basically, and then
Yep.
binge on
Yep.
carbohydrates on the weekend. And I saw some results, but definitely not the best results. And it wasn't until, and I don't know exactly how I came across him, but it was, I always think of Matt Ogus as one of my first inspirations. Do you know Matt?
Yeah. I do.
Cool.
I mean, I
So
don't know
he
him
was
personally,
like,
but I know who you're talking about.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was huge when I got into like YouTube fitness in like 2012, 2013. Him and like Chris Jones were like go back and forth. The Hodge twins. This was like people I grew up with, and I was just Ian McCarthy was like probably one of the first like scientifically minded individuals on YouTube in fitness who was like talking about these things, and I just loved it. I realized I'd always liked science at school, and I love knowing the whys behind things. I love
Yes.
data and tracking it. So I think this was like a very key sign that, hey, I'm that type of bodybuilder, analytical, less your kind of bro guy who just sees results by pushing himself hard. And it's almost like I needed to know why people were seeing results and what kind of led to those. So from there, I came across individuals like Eric Helms from 3D Muscle Journey,
Yes.
Lyle McDonald. I went on bodyrecomposition.com and I read every article he had on there for free, and they were just like absolutely gold mine of information. And then on bodybuilding.com, I came across Alan Aragon. He was like someone who was like moderating the forums. I found If It Fits Your Macros on there, and I was like, oh, it's like seeing through the matrix. I was like, oh, it's not like clean and dirty foods. There's like actual macros that and calorie balance and energy balance. And if I achieve these things, I can drive weight up and down, and that's going to impact my physique. So, oh, no wonder I got fat. I was eating stupid number of calories, even though they were all from like quote unquote clean sources.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went through it all in that phase. But once I found them, and Matt Ogus, the reason I bring him up was he was competing in natural bodybuilding. I was like, oh wow, I can do this thing. So yeah, I basically then in 2014 went through my first contest prep, and at the same time, as I said, I was building up passion for this. I educated myself on weekends as I was having a full-time job, office job at the time in London. On weekends, I was doing a personal training qualification, and I got qualified. And it just happened that my PT at home, the gym at home had a personal training opening. So I went and interviewed for it, and I got the job. And so in 2014, I transitioned to one-on-one personal training and started my first contest prep. Terrible combination in hindsight, because I was so ignorant to the low energy levels that would happen during a contest prep, and how apathetic you become, how like low energy you become. And so it was pretty tough. But the cool thing with that was a lot of the guys who are maybe 2 to 4 years younger than me saw my physique just transform. And also they gave me the nickname, I think it was compound guy, because I was always squatting, deadlifting, doing these big compound lifts, and they were just like curling. There wasn't the information there is nowadays. People weren't aware that, hey, there's actually like you probably want to do some big compound lifts to really get a good bang per buck and build a lot of muscle tissue. And they were just curling in the mirror like, yeah, this is going to grow my quads. So they saw me transform my physique, and they're like, hey, can you help me? And at this time, there was only like 3DMJ. There was a few online coaches. I had an online coach at the time. And I was like, yeah, I can probably like write you up a diet, and we can talk through things, have some check-ins, and I can write you a program. I just started building an online client base one-on-one in that gym. And then eventually that was earning me more income than my one-on-one personal training. So I started to just dwindle down my one-on-one personal training clients and time. Really, I didn't have that many clients. And just going online. And then eventually my girlfriend at the time, I say at the time, she's still my girlfriend. That's the girlfriend at the time. My partner still now. She's
Do you want me to cut that out of the? No.
She's survived 4 contest preps. So yeah, she's the one, I think. And so what was I saying? So anyway, I met her at work, and we were together. And then basically her rent was coming to an end at her current property. So she was like, I'm moving out. Do you want to move in with me? And I was like, yeah, it's a risk, but I'm going to leave my one-on-one personal training job. I was living at home at the time. I'm going to all in on online personal training. And I just doubled down on everything and grew the business from there. So yeah, that's where kind of Revive Stronger came from in terms of the online side. I was a one-on-one PT, but transitioned online, and bodybuilding kind of, saved me from the depths of like depression and feeling terrible from the accident, and give me confidence The biggest thing I say bodybuilding gives me is a sense of control and autonomy over my life,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I was able to take myself from the lowest low in terms of how I was feeling, how I was looking, to stepping on a bodybuilding stage I never thought I'd even be able to do, and then coming out of that and be in the best shape of my life. I was like,
Mm.
if I can do this, man, there's people out there who are struggling and they have it easy compared to what that was for me. So
Yeah.
I can definitely help them. So that's where it all kind of began as a background story of bodybuilding for me, and also online kind of coaching.
Yeah. Man, I'm totally with you on like just the benefits of training. Like most of my training, it falls under the kind of the hypertrophy banner. I did some powerlifting. I enjoyed it. I got, I guess, decently strong for my size frame, but I just enjoyed. I more was like I like building a physique. I like that's really what I want to focus on more than just like how much can I lift, how much can I, these, what's my total numbers, and that's kind of cool. I like it. I'm not dogging on any of that, but I just really enjoyed the hypertrophy type training. I didn't have a brain injury, but my wife and I had gone through just a lot of difficulty. We had a son who was born with medical complexity, and it was just last couple of years. I could almost say like he's turning 8, so the last 8 years has been just insane. And just being able to say, man, I can't control the outcome of this, but I can go to the gym and I can throw some weights around. Well, maybe throwing around weights is not the right way of saying it, but controlling it, good eccentric, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you're into like philosophy. There's the great Stoic philosophers that talk about controlling the controllables, and I feel
Yeah.
like a good application of that is being able to say, "Man, today sucks, but I can go to the gym and I can train hard." And it just like to me, it not only made me feel good just because I trained hard, but it reset my mind to be able to look at whatever problem I was facing with creativity, curiosity, and I just, overall just felt better, which is interesting. There's a lot of, so my company's mind and body, and I do a lot of oscillating back and forth between like mental performance and health. I have some certifications in mental performance, and then I also have some certifications in just like fitness training and whatever. But I'm constantly trying to educate myself further in these two domains. But it's really interesting how, um, man, if you want to change your mind, then you're probably going to have to change habits as it relates to your body as well, and how much that can help you. I have a therapist friend of mine who pretty much now, anytime a person's having a trouble working through something psychologically, he, he'll start with like, "Hey, are you exercising? Are you eating good nutrition?" And realizing the connection between like mental health and progression in mental health, and actually just having healthy rhythms as it relates to your body. So I think that kind of ties into what you were saying in your own life's journey. Bodybuilding has been a tremendous out, but not just because you're getting bigger muscles. It's actually just helping you cope with the struggles.
Yeah, I so much agree with everything you said there. Stoicism is, I think, if bodybuilders aren't knowing of what that is, they would benefit so much from having that, because there's so many, even actually just general like pop individuals. I just think about like scale weight. It's like, hey, don't stress about what the scale is saying. Like, control your process. Do what you need to
Mm,
do to see the scale go in the direction you want it to, and you can't control what the scale is going to say. Or as a bodybuilder, I do my best with my nutrition, with my training, with my peak week, that whole process. Then I step on stage, I pose as well as I can, I present as best I can. I can't control who turns up. I can't control what the judges want to see on that day. I can just present my best. Focus on what you can control, have that kind of autonomy and self efficacy built through that, and don't worry about the things outside of that. And absolutely, bodybuilding for me is a huge anchor in my life. I owe it so much, and it regularly turns up for me at times of which I'm feeling out of control, where I'm just like, hey, I can still have a good night's sleep. I can still go and crush some weights. I can still
yes.
feed my body with good nutrition, and that's going to help me with everything else. And as you part of your kind of branding, body and mind, they're so connected. You can't separate one from the other, really.
Yes, 100%. Let's dive into some bodybuilding prep. You've had I don't know how many competitions you've gone through, but in 2024 you got your pro card in
Yeah.
bodybuilding. It's not like you just did this one time. You're coaching other people. You're also a judge, correct, on bodybuilding.
Yeah,
What do you call them? Judge panels or whatever. And so you have a lot of perspective, I think, and nuance probably to bring to the table. So what does it actually take to achieve stage level conditioning? Now, that's probably way too broad of a question, but however you want to
pretty
take
broad.
that, like in your own experience, you mentioned like even the idea of like energy being low, um, up to that point. But like just from a kind of mental, physical, emotional standpoint, what would be some pointers that you would give to someone saying, "Hey, I want to pursue this. What does it look like to pursue stage level conditioning?"
Yeah, it's a great question because actually fundamentally bodybuilders are just masters of growing muscle, but during a contest prep, maintaining that muscle and bringing down body fat levels to essential levels, because that's how you present it. It's like the dirt that's covering the gold underneath. That's what we're trying to reveal there. And if anyone listening has gone through a diet, you're doing bodybuilding in that sense. You're bringing down body fat levels and you're trying to maintain or grow muscle tissue. You just don't take it to the extreme of where bodybuilders do. And that's the difference. We take our bodies to, and bodybuilding is an extreme sport in that sense, just like you maybe risk your life doing some of these other extreme sports. I'm not saying you risk your life doing bodybuilding, but it's a risky endeavor. You're taking yourself into territory that is physiologically unhealthy. I think sometimes people that don't know the sport look at bodybuilders on stage and they think that's the epitome of health. It's like, no. It's definitely not. Psychologically, they're not in a good shape. Physiologically, not in their best shape. They have to actually recover that post-show. So you're digging into territory that the body does not want to go. We have this idea of a lower intervention point of body fat, where basically for men, you can think about this as, for most guys, if they have their abs slightly in, maybe a little bit of muscle separation, they're low teens, around 10% body fat. This is about as low as they can go before the body is like kicking up a bit of a fuss, where you just start seeing diet fatigue really ramp up. And I use diet fatigue to term lots of things like hunger, energy levels, performance in the gym, libido, hormones, sleep, even digestive health for women, menstrual cycle health. Those things start to get iffy. So you're digging into territory the body does not want to go, and therefore everything expedites and gets much, much worse. So if people have done diets, they're hungry, they get moody, they have worse maybe sleep. Maybe they're not quite as interested in the opposite sex, but they're more interested in food. Everything is like that, but 10 times. And the leaner you get, so different. Obviously, bodybuilding is the epitome of like you're trying to get a walnut butt. You're trying to get as low as to your essential levels of body fat as you can whilst maintaining muscle tissue. The leaner you get, the more of that you're going to feel. It differs a little bit person to person, but no one finds that easy. So that would be a way to describe it. And when people come to me and they want to compete, I'm always just like, have you educated yourself on what the behind the scenes looks like? Because social media can glorify this, where we're smiling on stage with our muscles and we look happy, but underneath it all, we are on the edge of we have slightly disordered eating. For the short term, it's not something hopefully long term that you get, but you're risking that. Women might not have a functioning menstrual cycle, and they're risking things with that, especially if they don't recover that quickly. And there's other things involved too, where like I've had clients who they're not in the fitness space, and they're not self-employed, and so they have real jobs. Like real jobs, obviously we have real jobs, but it makes it a little bit easier when I'm in control of my schedule. The expenses are tax deductible. Even like I always say that, like it's expensive to compete. So if they're like, I don't know, I've had some people who are nurses, for example, and compete, and they run night shifts too, and I'm like, whoa, God, I've so much. I commend those individuals so much because their lifestyle is so hard. So again, flagging up, if you've got a stressful year ahead, it's not the time to compete. It needs to be like up there in terms of 1 to 2 of your top priorities. Otherwise, you won't bring what's required to stage because it takes so much from you. It becomes probably the most selfish sport there is. Although you can really benefit from having people alongside you, it's all down to you as an individual, which is empowering, but also can lead to suffering. So I don't know if that answered the question fully, but it gave some of the kind of things for people to think about.
Yeah, I have a curious question. I'm not sure if you know the answer to it, but is there a slight benefit or an edge or maybe a more significant benefit for somebody who's getting stage level conditioning, but they're on PEDs? Like they just feel better. Is it harder for a natural person to get to that level when it comes to like mental, physical, and emotional state? Does PEDs have an advantage? Obviously, I know with PEDs comes, payoffs as well. Like a lot of people who are on, like, say, like trend go through a lot of like psychological issues, mood swings. You get that
Yeah.
the steroid rage, all that kind of stuff. So, but I'm curious though if some of the PEDs offset some of the challenges. Or there, could you speak to that? So, natural versus enhanced.
It's a great question, and it's not one that I can provide much insight in because I only know the natural side.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to someone who's done both would probably have a better understanding of that. Like they've competed as a natural several times, and then they've done a prep on PEDs. I think that's a great person to ask. From my understanding, it's just as brutal, but they might be able to do the process quicker. That's my
Mm.
very zoomed out thoughts on steroids, is that they just speed up the whole process. It's like
Yeah.
living like 10 times the speed. Like if we can grow muscle at 10, they can grow it at 100.
Yeah.
So from my understanding, they can get into shape quicker. Obviously our testosterone goes through the floor, but they can give them to themselves exogenously, so they don't
Yeah.
see that same problem. Obviously, there's loads of different issues for females, like the male characteristics that come in through those androgens and everything like that. And so I can't speak too strongly on that side of things. I do know, as you said, there's psychological complications with some of these steroids. Everyone reacts differently. But for like peak week, some of the practices they do, and naturals are inappropriately take those on because we don't have to worry about half the stuff they do. There's so many more moving parts, which I think does add complication and make it more challenging. For a natural, especially for a guy, if you put them in a calorie deficit, like you give them cardio, you give them training, you give them a sufficient protein, like they're going to lose fat. They're going to get in pretty damn good shape.
Mm.
But when you're using those drugs, like the fluid retention, the scale weight doesn't become particularly usable. Like it just murks the water so much more, from my understanding. But yeah, like I said, I couldn't speak to it, but whenever I hear enhanced people talk about prep, it sounds just as soul destroying. So I have a feeling it's just as hard.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to like balancing muscle retention while cutting, maybe aggressively cutting for a show, what are some of the tricks of the trade for maintaining that muscle? Like obviously, probably most people would like jump to like high protein, the whole time, keeping that on point. But maybe you have some more nuance to the nutritional side of things that helps people feel
Yeah.
like, they feel they have enough protein, but also maybe enough, not cutting carbs so drastically, so they have energy performance wise. But I'm curious if like, okay, you're cutting weight. How do you maximize maintaining that muscle mass? Does your training change? Because there's some people who are just like, naturals. If you stop lifting really heavy weights, then you're just going to fade away, and they'll kind of dog on any isolation work almost, and but then you'll have conversations where people talk about like the stimulus to fatigue ratio. I want to think of an exercise because obviously we're already pretty fatigued, so we probably want to be a little bit more mindful of the exercise choice as we're getting
Yeah.
close to maintain muscle mass that doesn't unnecessarily fatigue more than it needs to. So I'm curious how you think about that as you're trying to maintain muscle mass in prep.
Yeah, if I was to somewhat simplify it, is what built the muscle, or what builds muscle retains muscle. So what gives you the best growth stimulus will give you the best muscle maintenance stimulus. And so you don't want to change your training too drastically from an off season, because that's when you're trying to grow muscle. You're still trying to grow, but you're less likely to. But that's not because of your approach to training. It's because now you aren't in a surplus or maintenance of calories, you're in a deficit. And that increases muscle protein breakdown just inevitably. So we're less likely to be in a muscle protein synthesis state, growing muscle tissue. When you look at muscle protein synthesis versus breakdown, we're trying to kind of match them at least. And we don't want to kind of see muscle loss by that breakdown being so large. So the biggest tool for people getting to stage ready leanness, and the thing that most people make the error of, is they don't give themselves sufficient time, because there are times of which when you have such small amounts of body fat to lose, you can't lose that quickly. You have to lose it really slowly because the body is so ready to be like, hey, you've only got a tiny amount of fat left, dude. We're just going to eat some of your muscle if you're going to put us in a big deficit. So, okay, so I have to lower my deficit, and that should be in accordance to the amount of body fat you have. So when you start a prep, yeah, 15 high teens of body fat, you can lose 1%, maybe slightly over 1% of body weight per week. But as you get leaner and leaner and leaner, especially as you go below that intervention point of body fat under about 10%, that's when your rate of loss may drop to 0.5% to 0.25%, to the point of which the scale starts to become useless because you're trying to track such small amounts of fat loss that the water fluctuations could even be more than that. So that's where people go wrong, where they're like, oh, yeah, I can get shredded. They look at the enhanced guys. No, they're getting shredded in 15, 10 weeks. It's like, and we got to double that, guys. If I always say a good rule of thumb for a natural is for every pound you have to lose, at least give yourself that many weeks. And if you can, add 2 to 4 weeks on top of that. Because truly, if you can go slower and be in a lesser of a calorie deficit, that's putting you in less of a muscle protein breakdown state. That's going to help you train better. It's going to help you feel better, recover better, all those factors that are going to help promote muscle retention. So the nuance of like stimulus fatigue ratio is definitely something. And hey, volume probably on average needs to come down because we're not able to recover from as much. But that's quite individual based, I would say. There are some people that just, I don't know, they can deadlift the whole way through prep. There's some people that's like, maybe we remove that. Maybe their lower back is somewhere when they have plenty of body fat on them, they can deal with these things. They're a bit more resilient. But when their body fat comes real low, we're moving to more machines, provide better SFR. We're maybe controlling the loads more. We're less bouncy out of the hole. We have pauses more so. And yeah, set volume might come down 25% or so. Versus where it would have been in an off season, but you're trying to keep as much of that growth stimulus there and keep it as much like your off season high growth potential training as possible. But at some point, you have to make some calculated decisions where you're like, you're going to injure yourself at some point, or like that. So yeah, so what I would say is the biggest. Sorry,
no. I was right. Just it's kind of like auto regulating in some sense. Like, like case by case, like, okay, this person is feeling discomfort or it's just, they feel like they might injure themselves. Well, sure, let's rotate that off. But generally speaking, you're like the stimulus to fatigue ratio on an exercise, you're judging that whether it's off season or on season. Like, you know, some people are like saying, is deadlifts actually worth it for bodybuilding? Like I'm talking about like a conventional deadlift, not like a stiff leg deadlift or something like that. I know Mike Isertel is kind of not a big fan of doing deadlifts for like building. However, there's other people like, dude, this is the way to build like a dense back or whatever. I don't know where you are actually on the spectrum there. I kind of lean more towards like, I do more stiff leg deadlifts because I just feel like this is really targeting what I'm trying to target more than kind of general. I'll let you speak to that since I brought it up.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm with you on this. I definitely think you want a hip hinge, like Romania deadlift, straight leg deadlift, a good morning. Doing deadlifts off the floor. There are people that do it. I can think of someone, very good natural bodybuilder. I've interviewed him on my podcast, Brandon Kempter. I believe he is weeks out from a show. He's still deadlifting. He's one of the best naturals, I would say, on the planet. He's very good. But I wouldn't be doing that because I don't think it's worth it for me. But he's clearly identified it's worth it for him. Or he can, quote unquote, get away with it. I couldn't fully say, but he's a very smart individual. But I think for a lot of people, it's not the best tool because it's taking a lot of muscle groups close to failure, but nothing specifically. Whereas when you're doing your straight leg deadlift, John, you're like really stimulating the glutes and hamstrings. And then that actual ratio of, okay, the glutes and hamstrings are getting really good stimulus and you're not getting that excess fatigue from just other muscle groups being involved and being highly fatigued. Yeah. I don't think it's a game changer by any means, but I think there's a reason not many like bodybuilders who, when people think of bodybuilders, think of like the best names out there at the moment, like a Derek Lunsford. You're not seeing him deadlifting weeks out from prep, like from his shows. Not many deadlift off the floor. You just lift so much. You also don't get much stretch on any one muscle. So I think, a better choice would be the hip hinge.
So going back to this muscle retention thing, it sounds like I'm going to repeat kind of like the concepts that you laid out. A lot of the puzzle piece that most people miss is just setting a big enough time horizon. Are you familiar with Alex Hormozi's stuff, business stuff? Alex
I
Hormozi.
know him, but I
Okay.
don't know if I know this specific thing.
Dude, I think you'd really like him. Maybe he's into bodybuilding in a sense, and not like competing. I just mean like just like he
He's
enjoys
pretty
training.
jacked. I've seen him.
Yeah, he's a jack dude, and but great business stuff, no nonsense. He's just a brilliant business dude. But he talks about one of the big reasons why people just fail in business is they just don't set big enough time horizons for their goal. It's like, I'm gonna, 6 months from launching, I'm gonna, make millions of dollars. And he's just like, okay, this is probably not realistic. Could you potentially, but like that expectation throws you off. You need to set bigger expectations, longer time horizons. But it sounds like to me that for natural bodybuilding, it's kind of like I need to reset my expectations here, realizing that once I get to that 10% mark and I'm trying to get underneath that to get contest ready, it's just going to be exponentially slower. And it's not that I'm doing something wrong, just long time horizon, just not even a
Yeah.
1% loss every week. It's going to be much, much slower. But the training, maybe some changes, but not so much. You said what got you the muscle will help you retain the muscle. When it comes to the diet, outside of high protein and staying in that caloric deficit in the range that you need to, is there any other particular tricks that you would mention there?
Yeah, I think you did a great summary of that, by the way. I always analogize that period of time like digging for gold, where you are just you're digging for gold. It's like that. If you've seen the meme where someone turns back just before they've got to the gold, where they're like, "Oh, it's too much effort." They're digging, 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 and then they turn back just before they're like centimeters away from it.
Yeah.
So you're digging for that final bit, but at the same time, you've dug down here and everything around you could fall down on you if you're not careful, if you like chip away somewhere excessively. So that's kind of an analogy, and bodybuilders will talk about the digging phase, and that's kind of what we're talking about there. In terms of nutritional kind of hacks and tricks, not so much, unfortunately. I wish there was, but high protein, definitely something you'll want
Come
to be
on,
doing.
Steve, give us the hack.
I know. There was actually a recent meta-analyses that looked at this. I know Eric Helms, Martin Ruffalo were on it, and it's kind of looking like, hey, the more protein, almost the better. But there becomes a point where you can only have so much protein where, well, you've got to keep it in an energy deficit, and then also you need sufficient fat and carbs. So you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul at times, and so there might even be times you're like, man, my energy levels are so low, I need some more carbohydrates to perform in the gym. And the actual weight training is what builds muscle. It's the I always say it's the light that the match that lights the fire for muscle gain. It's more important than your nutrition. So there might be a time where you're like, oh, I even bring my protein down a little bit to put towards carbohydrates maybe. Or also with fat intake, you need enough for health and well-being, for the fat soluble vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids. You don't want to go too low fat for too long. Some people will feel really bad on that. So I don't like to go much lower than 40 grams for an extended period of time. I'd say you're going to go below 40 if it was weeks, maybe a month or so, but try and get that back up. Then carbohydrates, I don't really like to come much below like 1 gram per pound if I can help it. And the same with protein, which kind of starts limiting you if you start to work that out.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of playing around with, well, there's this energy flux theory, which you may have you heard of energy flux, John?
Yes.
Yeah. So the kind of short story of that is, if you have two people on a 500 calorie deficit, the one who can eat more and be in that deficit by expending more energy is probably going to be in a superior position. So I tend to then pull on, right, can we increase steps? Can we maybe do a little bit of like low intensity cardio? Maybe we wear a weighted vest on some of those walks that you're doing. Try and get expenditure up so we aren't pulling calories too low. And then obviously you need to stay satiated, and there's adherence and everything there. So it's, yeah, like I said, it's kind of a tricky game when you're getting to that final phase. But there are things like refeeds and diet breaks that within the literature, for those who've like kept up to date with it, they don't seem to be anything magical or special. I think people think they are, because it's like sometimes people drop weight during these phases, and it's not like, hey, they're not reigniting your metabolism. Unfortunately, a lot of the physiological effects of them are very short term. So you might get a boost in some like of the hormones that you want to be boosted, but after a number of days back in a deficit, they basically go back to where they once were. The real benefit seems to be psychological. And it's great that we've already spoken about this because, as we said, body and mind are kind of one of the same.
Mm.
And so I think those psychological benefits can be huge. And I think one of the biggest things that help bodybuilders get as shredded as they do is they're psychologically strong. They're mentally tough. They can just do things that other people can't. Everyone physically can do it, but some people mentally break down. Like that guy digging for gold. He's just mentally given up. He physically could have dug there. He's mentally
Mm.
given up.
Mm.
So I think there is some good physiological benefits to having the refeed. You also get the benefit of seeing your physique a bit more alive and full. And we know that being in a glycogen depleted state for an extended time does start risking muscle loss. And just we know this all from like even having a pre-workout amount of carbohydrates, but just having some carbohydrates in you to refill glycogen stores, training's a bit better. Again, if we can bolster training by having a refeed, then that can be really effective. But if people don't give themselves enough time to have days taken away from being in a deficit, where refeeds and diet breaks are days or a day at maintenance, then you're not going to be able to do those. Is it just being in a smaller calorie deficit on average, or is the refeed doing something specifically? It's hard to tie apart, but I think there's a reason so many bodybuilders use refeeds during their contest preps. I got to believe they're doing something, and through my experience too, there's been good benefits there.
Yeah. With my clients, the clients I'm training are not training for competition, but just trying to just general health, longevity, so forth. I do really enjoy, and I think it's helpful to do like 12 to 16 weeks of diet and then taking a diet break. But I'm right with you. The main reason I'm doing it is for that psychological reset. It's just it can be hard. I mean, maybe from a bodybuilder perspective, you're like, what, 16 weeks? That's weak. We could go much longer. But for somebody who's just really, they have a hard time sticking with something for a month, and they're just like, oh man, this is so hard. And it's like really trying to like slowly stack the habits so that they win, and just trying to figure out, okay, here's where they're at. Okay, we probably can go about 12 weeks here, and we might want to take a break. Sometimes I have like a really resilient client. It's just like, man, they just check all the boxes. You know, they're just okay. We could probably keep going here longer, but I do find that the breaks are helpful. I strategically place like little diet breaks if I'm in like a cutting phase. I've tried, and I don't know if we'll get to this a little bit, but I've tried a little bit of the whole like even in bulking, like kind of the bulking mini cut idea. Maybe we could touch on that later. That's a kind of a different topic, but just kind of that can even be a little bit of a break, especially if you're getting really tired of eating so much food but trying to bulk. You know, it
It's
can
like a
be
diet break for the bulk.
yeah, exactly. It's kind of the reverse aspect of that. But let me stay on this whole like getting down to that conditioning. Talk to me a little bit about like that prep, or excuse me, that peak week. Okay, so maybe carb management, sodium, water. Do you do diuretics in preparation? You know, like things like that. What do you think? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah. So peak week is peak week's a bit like supplements in that it gets so much time and attention, but the actual results it drives are so small. Unless you really fuck it up and you maybe take a supplement you really shouldn't have, and that does has some bad consequences. Same with peak week. It's one of those things that can make you maybe 5% better, but it can make you 50% worse if you screw it up. So that's why I always like to start with peak week is, okay, think about, people might know the muscle and strength pyramids, and nutritionally it's calories, and then obviously supplementation at the top. Peak week in terms of a contest prep, it's that top of the pyramid. It's the sprinkles on top of the well-iced, well-baked cake that's delicious. So it can give you that little bit of spike at the end to make you look that bit better. Or yeah, you can screw it up. You could put on, I don't know, out of date sprinkles and ruin the whole cake, to put it that way. So
I like that.
That's the best I could come that was kind of PG. So yeah, in terms of peak week, nutritionally, I really like to focus on basically trying to get someone as glycogen full as possible without spilling over. That's what people talk about, spilled over and like full physiques. When you're dieting, you're in a glycogen depleted state. Actually, let's start off first of all. Someone should come to peak week already in shape. So you should already come looking like, hey, if you stepped on stage tomorrow, you'd actually look pretty good. yeah, you could be a bit fuller, you're a bit flat, maybe there's a bit of inflammation within the muscles, but ultimately you're in great shape. Don't expect peak week to make you suddenly shredded or anything along those lines. It can help emphasize the physique, but yeah, it can't make up for that lack of physique. So then I like to use peak week as an opportunity to replenish glycogen stores. Essentially, that's the short of it, and try and get those as full as possible without spilling over. So you don't want it in the subcutaneous space, which then if water goes to it, and it makes you look like it's body fat. People say I'm holding water, and it's like, no, you just have body fat there. But if you're shredded and you peak properly, you can then push the muscles against the skin that then doesn't have fat over there, and they can look bigger. You can look more conditioned even.
Yes.
So it's about trying to push carbohydrates as high as possible without getting to that spilled over point. And that's the main thing I like to manipulate. I like to keep protein pretty steady, fats pretty steady, and just play with the carbohydrates. That way, I know if I get X look, it's because I changed this with my carbs. But if I get X look and I changed carbs, I changed sodium, I changed water, I changed so many different things. Like, well, how do I know what caused that look? I don't. Whereas if I know if someone's looking a bit softer the next day, hey, we pull back on carbs this next day, or we increase expenditure a little bit, they're going to tighten up. We're going to get the look we want. So that's how I like to generally do it. Protein, fats, pretty stable, manipulate carbohydrates. Some people do. People would have heard of like front loads, mid loads, back loads, rapid back loads, progressive linear loads. It's all just where are you loading the carbs? And the refeeds that we spoke about before can give you insights into that. So if you're doing back-to-back 2 refeeds a week and you do 5 low days, 2 back-to-back refeeds, you can look, do I look my best on after 1 day of refeeding, 2 days of refeeding, or 2 days of refeeding and then a low day, or 2 low days? When do I look my best in the week? And then you might be like, oh, if I look my best after 2 high days and then 2 low days, let's do a front load, and then I can have 2 low days and then come into the show nice and sharp. Or you might be like, oh no, just after 2 high days I look my best. So they can kind of give you a bit of an insight into your peaking process, which is really helpful. Other things you mentioned, electrolytes, they become a bit more important to have a handle on when you are doing rapid backloading approaches. So any backloaded approach, especially a rapid backload, which is basically the day before the show, doing all your carbohydrate loading, they're more risky because you just haven't got the time to be able to make a change. It's basically like a one-shot punt. You wake up the day after your rapid backload, it's like, how are things? Because glycogen takes time to be stored properly within muscles. At least 12 hours to like having any good amount of glycogen storage. It's like 24 plus hours. So for less risky approaches, you're okay because you could like do something on Thursday, carb up, and then you still have Friday, maybe if a Saturday show, you could do some cleaning up on the Friday if you needed to, or some topping off or maintaining. And then, yeah, electrolytes become more important because you need sodium to store carbohydrates. So you want to have that balanced, but then you also want to have a balance of potassium because that's also important too. And they're also carriers of fullness within the physique. So you want to have enough of those. So that becomes a little bit more complicated and people can make more errors through the backload approach. So I like to, for my guys, most of them aren't doing a rapid backload, but most of them do a backloaded or a linear load. Rarely I do a front load, but I'm getting them to track their fluid intake and their sodium intake weeks before. And then the rest of their diet is pretty much in a vacuum so that I know, hey, if you're adding this many teaspoons of salt and you're having this diet, we know we're having about this much sodium. And then you're drinking, most people are on like 4 to 8 liters of fluid. It varies quite a bit person to person, which makes sense. But I like to kind of see where that's at. I might build it up slightly because both water and sodium are needed for peak week. And it's generally, I think, better to have them higher than lower. And I basically keep those pretty static or they go up with the carbohydrates. So I might just bump them up a liter when they're going through a carbohydrate loading day, for example, and then add half a teaspoon of salt just to make sure we've got that present. So we're getting the fullest look possible. But I don't manipulate those much at all. And I've tried loading approaches where you basically drink a couple of gallons of water, like 12 liters, and that's to like then get diuresis up and running. And so then it almost acts a bit like a diuretic. And I just find those approaches very stressful for the people and not worth the risk that they could play. So I've done it even myself, and but first of all, it's very stressful.
You don't do any of that type of like dehydration approach or anything like that? Yeah.
If anything, it's overhydration is the only way I've ever gone.
Okay. Okay. Great. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't seem like, again, like I have read and studied different type of peak weeks, in part because I'm thinking, like I told you before, I was like, yeah, you know what? I think I might, and I've actually investigated a little bit with this because um, the lowest that I've ever have gotten to body fat percentage is like, I think I gotten down to 8%. Um, I just went through a cutting phase, was starting a business, focusing on that. You know how you start to like cut and you're like, oh wow, I had more fluff on me than I realized, type of thing. I gain weight globally pretty well, so it's not like just like localized to my gut. So I was like, hey, I still look pretty good. I probably lose about 15 pounds and I'll be right in there. So and then you lose the 15 pounds. You're like, oh crap, I got more to lose. So from January to where I'm at now, I've lost 25 pounds, and I am probably right at that 10% mark. I might be a little higher than that. I'm actually going to check here soon, but I'd like to see if I can get down to single digits again and just kind of push the envelope. But maybe next year, 2026, I'm thinking about like saying, hey, maybe I'll try to compete. But I just want to see if I can
Cool.
first kind of play around with it. Maybe not necessarily do a full peak week just to do it, but I'm kind of like getting the lay of the land of what's the best approach of doing this. But yeah,
Yeah.
anyways, but that's
Yeah.
interesting because the reason I brought that up is like I have looked into the whole like when to limit water and when to flush it out. And I was like, huh, that sounds interesting. I wonder if this is a good approach for if there's a distinction between those who are on PEDs versus not on this, or maybe there's not. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I find most naturals, if you just keep their water high, they just look good.
Yeah.
Like they just look good. And so, yeah, I think it's more of an enhanced side of the sport thing to do. And I know there are natural coaches that like to manipulate quite a lot of different things. And in my experience, the look is just isn't worth the extra effort. And sometimes I do wonder if people are, athletes alike, or even clients, they want to change, even though you're like, you don't need to change anything. Like it's all fine. Like the program they're doing is great. It's running really well. They're losing weight at the right pace. But they just want you to change something. They just need something. They want to feel like something's changed. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if some of those manipulations come in because it's just like the buy-in from the client. It's like, no, we've got to change something. You brought up a great point in terms of like leanness. As I said, you need to be shredded to benefit from a peak week. There are some categories that will benefit less from peaking, like a bikini competitor. They don't have the level of leanness required for as bodybuilders do. So the amount of like peaking that they need to do is mostly stress reduction, make sure they're not like feeling super beat up, making sure they're not holding on to loads of, like I said, stress and inflammation from that, making sure they've got some fullness, but you don't want any crazy vascularity. You don't want like skin splitting pumps, that they have quite a tight but like softer look versus a male bodybuilder, for example.
Mm.
So some people might inappropriately, like natural bodybuilders have inappropriately applied some of the tools from enhanced guys. Bikini competitors can inappropriately apply some of the peaking strategies for other categories. So it's kind of category specific in that way too. But
Mm.
the biggest thing you can do is make sure you're not flat and carb up and make sure you've got a good amount of carbohydrates in the system. What I will say with nutrition, some things people might not get because that was basically macro level, is thinking about some of the other things in terms of like, hey, if you're increasing your food, you don't want to just have more of the same things, but you don't want to introduce something new. You want to have things that are lower in fiber, that are easy to digest. Probably rice-based products are going to be good in those circumstances. Again, look at your refeeds. What did you use there that didn't lead to bloating? Because, yeah, if you just end up eating loads more oats or something, you're suddenly going to be really struggling, or loads of potato. Again, that would ramp up your potassium. So you want to keep eyes on those sort of things. Rice is great because it's pretty neutral in terms of if it's just rice, there's not like added sodium, added potassium. It's just literally like glycogen that's going to go alongside that, and most people digest it really, really well. Doesn't add fiber as well, but those are some things you might even think about removing. FODMAPs,
Yeah.
any like highly fermentable foods that can cause gut irritation. If your fiber is really high, you might reduce it slightly. Again, some people like to like almost remove fiber, and I think that sometimes can lead to the opposite situation where they're then constipated. So I
Mm,
like to keep fiber in there, but near enough where it's been.
yeah.
So those are some of the other things. Some people remove sweeteners, artificial sweeteners as an example, and there is some evidence to suggest that can cause some gut irritation and some inflammation. But I think if someone's had like a Diet Coke, a can a day throughout prep, they can have that as well. It's not a problem. Most people deal with it just fine, but some people like to remove that. Supplements, some people like to remove creatine, some people like to keep it. I can see reasons for both. Again, I haven't really seen a problem getting people shredded keeping creatine in. And
Mm,
if I can keep things pretty steady, I kind of like to keep it steady.
yeah.
I'm open to changing my mind on these sort of things, but yeah, that's. And then if someone's using there's like a fat burner that is not banned. And you have it with like a black coffee, caffeine in the morning. I don't use it. That's why I've forgotten what it's called. Yohimbine. So
Yeah. Okay.
Yohimbine, that's something that if you're using something like that, you might want to remove it. But I'm assuming people aren't using that sort of thing anyway, because I
Yeah.
don't tend to recommend it.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. That actually kind of clarified some of the prep competition in my mind, just because there's kind of diverse approaches. And I had a hard time kind of like which is probably more biasing towards a enhanced approach versus a natural approach. I was like, had a little bit of difficult time figuring that out myself. So that was really helpful. Um, do you have any of your clients like, hey, we're gonna practice some peak weeks, like if they're like a year out and you're trying to get them conditioned stuff? Do you do any practice peak weeks, or you're just like, hey, this is your first bodybuilding show, don't sweat it. We're gonna do it through, and we'll learn from here. If they're committed to this, like a lifestyle, then they'll just get better as they go.
Yeah, I definitely don't, because basically, like I said, peaking would only benefit someone who's very lean, and I would never get someone that lean unless they are going to
Yeah, and it
compete.
kind of takes away
So
from
only
the building opportunity.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah. So I never recommend anyone get shredded unless they have a reason for it. If
yeah.
you're doing a photo shoot, if you're doing a show, go for it. But outside of that, man, just get a little bit of abs.
So
You're
yeah,
lean
I did
enough. You
I
don't need to
failed to
go
say
there.
that because it does sound like I'm doing exactly what you're saying not to do. But I am actually doing
Do a photo shoot.
I am doing a photo shoot, and
There you
I'm
go.
turning 40 this year. So
Oh,
actually
nice.
in July I'm turning 40. So it was just kind of one of those things like um I have this kind of story arc where I was working out. Started working out in high school and loved it and done all kinds of training. Just a quick short of my story. I did everything when it comes to different training styles. Like I think I started off what I remember. I got Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia for Bodybuilding, familiar with that big book, and
Yeah, I've got it. It's on my shelf.
yeah, went through it, learned a lot of a ton of things from it. I know some of it's outdated as far as like what actually works, but I remember at that time I was like, "Hey, I'm going to apply this." Really helped me. I remember doing like Arnold's splits, chest and back together, and going and doing bench press, and then going and doing pull ups, doing 50 pull ups it was kind of fun. It was nostalgic for sure. But then I started tapping into the high intensity crowd a little bit, and I came across Mike Mentzer, and then I don't know if you know Ellington Darden's book, High Intensity
No.
Training. Ellington Darden he kind of gave a history of like, here's Arthur Jones, the guy who kind of
Yeah.
started the intensity, and then him training Casey Vader. Is it Vader? His last name, something like that. And he like gained this much muscle by doing only negatives, and all this kind of stuff. You never know who was actually on PEDs though. They didn't really they didn't enter the conversation. But the just the fact like, hey, you could do, a warm-up set, but just do one set absolute to utter failure and then move on to the next exercise. Then I came across Dorian Yates training, which seemed to be a little bit better. Um, he was explaining things better than what I was hearing from. So I liked it even better than like kind of Mike Mentzer. I know he's kind of worshipped. There's like a resurgence of Mike Mentzer,
Yeah. I've
like
seen
a
it.
crazy resurgence. And but I trained that way for a while, and I definitely benefited from learning to train hard. Like it was
For
good
sure.
learning to train hard. But then I started seeing benefits from like, but if I do a second set and I train hard, I'm actually seeing some more growth than if I do a third set. Um, and as long as I kept my intensity on point. And of course, there's the whole conversation of junk volume and what's the upper limit of volume. And I know there's a big discussion there, but I went from Arnold's style training, kind of more higher volume. There's some intensity there to the high intensity. Then I did, I don't know if you know Peter Sisko's static contraction training.
No,
It's
it doesn't sound fun.
it's trash, dude. It's trash. I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just like they basically just said if you
Isometrics. Ooh.
basically, yeah. So I would be like, I would unrack like 500 pounds on the bench press, which felt like a house. Like I never benched 500, but I was just like, just trying to hold it. I'm just thinking that looking back on it, just thinking the dangers that could be involved in something like this. But you just basically come out of a lock position. You're allowing the weight to just hold it for a certain amount of time. You try to increase your overall time. And they're like, your muscle is either contracted or not, and you don't need to go through range of motion. I don't know if you've seen literature like this, but
I've seen someone doing it in the gym years ago, and I was always like, I was just like,
I
oh,
tried
man.
it for I think like a couple of weeks, and this was years and years ago, and I was like, I could just kind of see like, I don't think this makes sense. I'm not doing this, and I just definitely didn't feel the same amount of benefit for sure, just from. And I know they probably would argue you didn't do it long enough, but anyways, but I went through that. Then I slowly kind of went back into just like, I was like, I'm tired of jumping from trend to trend. I really want to dive into like the science behind what actually builds muscle, and started developing a little bit more, honestly, kind of a balance. Like intensity is important, volume's important. Yeah, have you had when you're trying to help someone train for a competition, um, you have to help them overcome some of those tendencies of what they've heard from, whether it's Mike Mincer style training? You kind of put out the fires a little bit. And what are some of the common mistakes that you see like first competitors make? Like you say, this is a trend that I see consistently.
Yeah. Thankfully, when I work with someone, they are fundamentally bought into what I'm doing with them. I have their trust, which is great. There might be times of which they have questions or doubts, but thankfully, again, the way I advertise myself is very much like, it's not my way or the highway. It's, you ask me a question. If you don't understand something, I'll answer the question. I'll tell you why we're doing that thing. If you don't agree with me, we can have a conversation about it and come to like a mature decision together. It's a collaboration, not like I'm your coach, you must do everything I say. So I'm normally on a level with them where if they do hear something like that's left field, they're pretty good at being like, nah, Steve would say that's dumb or whatever it is, they kind of get their head taken around it. But again, if they do come to me and they're like, hey, why are we doing this much volume? Mike Mentor says just do one. Or, hey, this enhanced guy is saying that we should restrict sodium and restrict fluids the final kind of day leading into the show. Why aren't we? I'd always have answers for them. So that's the way I tend to squash those, where it's just like, I just simply tell them the reason I have, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. And then they're good and they're bought into the process. So yeah, it's something that I find fundamentally important with coaching, is almost educating at the same time, because the better they understand the reasons for it, the better they're executing it. I can't imagine having a coach who tells me to do something and me not really believing that it's going to do it, asking them about it, and they're just like, trust me, bro. And then I'm like, I'm not just going to do this. Like, I'm going to do my own thing then. And then suddenly the coaching relationship just fumbles. So
Yeah.
trust is so important in that case. As a first timer, mistakes. We've kind of covered one, so I will do a different one. But the biggest one I would say is not giving enough time, underestimating how much body fat they have to lose. Then other mistakes. I would say a big mistake, actually. This might come as a surprise to people, and they might not think of it. You have it as a question, is posing. I think a lot of competitors don't realize how important posing is. Again, in terms of hierarchy of importance, learning to pose properly and present your physique and have endurance on stage is more important than peak week, because you have to get into the pose to be able to show the physique properly. If you can't present your physique, I've seen guys with heaps of muscle and then they try and hit a pose and I'm like, oh my God, like, yeah, clearest example is like a rear double bicep. You'll have seen people who do it and it's like they're all pinched up in the scapula. They're retracted. It's suddenly like, you got no width. I know you've got width. I know you've got lats. I can't see them. So you can't judge them properly on that. So just having that ability to present like artwork that you've worked so hard on is so important. So I think people don't give enough time to posing, especially earlier on in prep, because it's obviously becomes more and more specific the nearer you get to stage. But also you become more tired. You care less, and posing in tiny trunks is it's cold. You don't want to do it. So starting early in prep is such a good idea to get just the fundamentals. When you've got the energy, you've got the focus for it, and then it becomes more of a habit and you can develop it towards the stage. But I'll have my guys, I periodize their posing practice alongside their nutrition and training. So I'll be like,
nice. Yeah.
Week 1 of prep, we're doing 3 times a week mandatories, twice through, hold every pose 5 seconds. And then they send their posing every 2 weeks. And then as we get nearer, it's every week. And then we increase the time they're holding each pose. We increase the frequency they're doing it at, and it's built in as if it's as important as everything else.
Does that increase their conditioning, just doing the posing, you think, or no?
It definitely burns calories.
Okay.
So I do think it has the side benefit. We're not doing it for that, just like weight training. We don't do resistance training to burn calories to help us lose fat. We're doing it to maintain muscle. We're not doing the posing to burn calories. We're doing it to get the proficiency for on stage.
Fair enough,
but it definitely does. It's definitely fatiguing. It definitely does burn some calories.
I know that.
I think it's actually been looked into a little bit.
Like lore for like Arnold. You got to pose. Bring out the.
Oh, it doesn't etch in the striations. No, unfortunately, I wish it did.
I know. I remember him kind of saying like, I actually saw a video of his the other day. He was just like, I did this exercise for this, and I do the cable crossovers to pull out the. I was like, it's like
that's the way he think about things.
Yeah, but. I mean, obviously he was incredible. Some of the science may be lagging behind a bit, but that was funny to hear. I wonder if the posing does heighten the conditioning, if it did or not.
Yeah, no, for sure. It actually happened. You said I'm a judge. I judged just this past weekend, and there was this competitor who was in the overall. It was a first timers novice event, so perfect for this question. And there was I can't remember exactly what category he was in, but he won his class. He was in the overall. And he was in contention. I almost had him winning, but he lacked conditioning in terms of endurance of posing. He wasn't switching on his quads. Your quads, they could be shredded, but if you can't turn them on to show off the separation, they just look like flat, like nothing's there. But when you flex them, you spread the floor apart as if you're trying to do a leg extension. Suddenly, boom, now you can see all the separation between every head. And you just couldn't see it with him. He just started getting like lazy. His stomach would start coming out and distended a bit more. And suddenly, my eyes are going elsewhere to another competitor who's still polished with their posing. It plays a role in those sort of situations. I think it's been looked into a little bit where posing can heighten people's like connection to muscles. And so they might, like if you can't contract a muscle, you can't show off the detail of it, right? I had this with my calves. We might come on to my muscle connection discussion because it kind of links in a little bit, but my right calf is smaller than my left. And I, for a time, couldn't really contract it. Like sat here now, I can contract my right calf because I've solved it. But there was a time where I was like, man, I can't contract it. And you'll get people who try and do like a front lat spread, a front relaxed. And you need to like protract the shoulder blades, show off the lats, and they can't. They're like, oh, I don't connect to it. It's like, well, you probably have underdeveloped lats then, because I don't imagine you're pulling with them very effectively if you can't actually present them like that. So I think some of the posing might allow people to show more condition because they can actually contract muscles. But I don't think it's making someone tighter in terms of like, I don't think there's any like fat loss benefit to doing it, apart from some energy expenditure, but you're not really doing it for that purpose.
Now, Steve, there's a study that says that mind to muscle connection doesn't matter anymore. So I don't know what you're talking about. Actually, you posted today, didn't you, on that? I think you posted something today on maybe it was yesterday.
It was today, yes.
Like I know we're on different times basis, so it might be, but I was thinking
threads.
I
forget sometimes I post on there.
I snagged that quote and I put it on my notes here. I was like, I'm going to bring this up a little bit because there was a little bit of and I actually haven't looked into it fully, so I'm not even sure all the argumentation on it, but it just seems to be like they're saying, hey, this doesn't matter as much as we thought when it comes to like motor recruitment and the mechanical tension, which is so funny to me. How there's this crowd who's just like, there's no other nuance outside of mechanical tension. It's like it's mechanical tension. They'll dog on everything. And I get it. I think there is some good nuance to be said about like maybe some of the old school, and you feel free to push back against this if you disagree, but like some of the old school guys would so emphasize time under tension. And it's really like, well, really, if you're creating that mechanical tension, if you pause at the top for a moment, you're not ruining the set, or even like a isometric hold at the bottom for a second. It's not going to like ruin the set. In some ways, you might benefit for something like that. So I do think that's good, but there's this almost like oversimplification, like any type of intensity principle is just junk. What are you doing? Don't do that. There's this emphasis on low volume, really heavy weights. I don't know if you've like interacted with that crowd, but there's like this huge emphasis on that today. Just like
anything over 4 reps or something's bunk.
Yeah, it's just
wasted effort.
It's like, well, like, they'll like lift something like, see, when I lift this, it's like with the motor recruitment, this is just slow twitch muscles. If I really want to recruit as much muscle fiber, it's got to be as heavy as possible. And that's going to be in this 4 to 5 rep range, but you're going to have less overall fatigue. And I get some people might just chase the pump when they go to the gym. Let me come to the whole other conversation, but let's hit on the mind to muscle connection first. You said if the mind to muscle connection doesn't matter, does that mean if someone feels an exercise in the unintended muscle, we ignore it? That was the question that you posed. Elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I just like to come at some of these things like backwards, if that makes sense. So it's like people will say that, again, I'm here for some of the arguments against the mind muscle connection, and then overemphasizing that I think can be a problem. The same is for example, the pump. As you mentioned, a lot of people are like, the pump doesn't matter. Don't chase that. It's mechanical tension is king for muscle growth. I'm like, I'm here for that. But what if I do a squat and I finish it and I just got a massive pump in my lower back, not in my quads, and I'm trying to do it for my quads? Is that a problem? It's probably not a good thing. But if I got off and had a pump in my quads, you'd probably say that's probably a good thing, wouldn't you? So do we ignore it? It's the same with mind muscle connection. If you're doing an exercise and all you can, like, you're like, man, I can't feel that. I can't feel a stretch in that muscle. I can't feel a pump in that muscle. I can't feel burn in that muscle. All the signs of kind of that biofeedback of this muscle's getting stimulus.
Yeah.
It's just not there. And I've definitely just gone through the motions of, I'm just moving A to B like a powerlifter would, and not really got the intended muscle, the growth for that muscle. And I actually talked about it recently on the Improvement Season podcast. It's like a side project towards the main podcast. And I talked about my calf and how it was really underdeveloped. My left calf is bigger than my right. And it's because I couldn't contract the muscle. I'm like, well, you might be able to do an exercise, but if you're not properly contracting a muscle, I have a hard time believing it's going to grow at its best and you're recruiting it at its best. And it made me think of some of the enhanced bodybuilders when they get nerve damage within muscles because of, I don't know, whatever reason, part of the sport I don't really understand. They suddenly atrophy in that muscle. It's like, where did it go? Well, if they've got nerve damage, they can't contract it anymore. It's just going to atrophy away. It's just going to die. So I think there's got to be something to the mind muscle connection. There's a reason, and I come to like the real world test is something I like to use. It's like, in the real world, what do people do? What do bodybuilders do? They talk about the mind muscle connection and that it's probably important. They talk about something like the pump. It's probably important. Yeah, and if there's enough of them saying that, there's got to be something to it. So I don't know if sometimes people use the mind muscle connection in an inappropriate way, but I do think there's some benefit there. And I think it's mixed within research too. There'll be people with biases who will say, oh, this just confirms already what we knew, the mind muscle connection is bunk. But it's mixed. There are some research that shows a benefit of it, others that doesn't. And I really like I think this is Brad Schoenfeld's position. So, Brad, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's like the GOAT of hypertrophy research.
If you read hypertrophy literature, it's like you're going to read a lot of his stuff. Yeah.
Yes. I think his position basically is, for big compound lifts where there's lots of muscle groups involved, you probably want to have an external focus, which means like, hey, I'm trying to squat to here and lift up to here, or I'm benching down to here, not try and focus on one exact muscle. For isolation lifts, then you can really focus. Hey, I'm doing a bicep curl. It should just be hitting my bicep. Let's feel the bicep doing the work. Because, hey, I'm just moving at one joint. I can actually pay the time and attention to it. I think that's a general good philosophy to have. So that's kind of where I stand with it. I think it's not something to be ignored. And like you kind of mentioned, and actually that's a really good way of describing it. I liked how you said it, how some people are just like distilling everything. Mechanical tension, that's all they care about. It's like, well, there's probably some nuance in there. Maybe the like metabolic stress and muscle damage, maybe that is just all mechanical tension, but I don't think they're things to ignore. And there might be different routes towards mechanical tension that could hypertrophy muscles in a different way.
Yeah.
Like you said with reps, maybe there is something to high reps and they hypertrophy more slow twitch muscle fibers, and lower reps hypertrophy more fast twitch muscle fibers. It's probably not good to throw out tools. It's probably a good idea to have them in there.
Yeah.
And again, if real world bodybuilders have been doing intensity techniques and using pumps and mind muscle connection and saunas to some degree, there's probably something there. Success kind of leaves clues. Not to say they're absolutely right, but there's something there.
So this is probably anecdotal, but in my experience, like, I don't want to be doing lateral raises in the like 4 to 5 rep range. Like, I'm sure you can grow muscle there. Like, I'm not doubting you could create good mechanical tension, drive some growth. And I've seen some guys like crazy lifting some like 60-pound dumbbells out to the side or more. But for me, I just feel like it's safer. And I feel like there is something to kind of that fast twitch, slow twitch muscle fibers. Like when I'm training shoulders, I know there's a good mixture of fast twitch and slow twitch in like your shoulder muscles, but I find with lateral raises particularly, like I benefit from a higher rep range. And sometimes like doing like myo reps, I think you've talked about that style of training before, but the crowd that's really pushing for low volume, heavy weights will say like all of that's like trash, like the whole like metabolic stress working for hypertrophy. But even if it's in the sleeve of actually the mechanic or metabolic stress is actually creating more mechanical tension. And I think Mike Isertel puts it this way, where he says like, you're actually, if you do like a myo rep style, creating a lot of mechanical tension, but then because you're, lessening the time that you go back, you're just extending that mechanical tension with that huge giant set. So instead of just doing one set to failure, you might actually improve the overall mechanical tension for that particular exercise by the myo rep style. So I feel like, oh, hey, that's cool. That's a tool in my toolbox rather than like just saying, nope, it's just exercise to failure and then rest. Now I like straight sets, don't get me wrong. And I would probably prefer straight sets. I think I use myo reps a little bit more like I want to get extra work in, but I have limited time. So I'm going to use this as a tool. But at the same time, I do feel like there's a space for metabolite training. What's your thoughts there? I know we're coming up on the end of our time here together, so I will ask you a few more questions. But what's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm very much like you. I'm not one that likes to throw out tools in the toolbox, and I definitely see myo reps as one of those things that can help get dense volume in quickly. I don't think they're special. I don't think there's like something incredible about them, but I think they are also psychologically very challenging and different to using just straight sets. Even if it's just like a bit of spice, again, to make things a bit more exciting, a bit more engaging, I think that's absolutely fine as a tool for variety. So I primarily focus on just straight sets with my programming, but definitely for muscles that can do a lot of volume and they have a high volume tolerance, like the lateral delts, I think myo reps are a great tool to use. And it's just as you said, essentially, it seems like the last like 4 reps seem to be the most hypertrophic. And so if you are shortening your rest times, you're into those kind of fatiguing reps already. So it's not to say that the other reps don't do anything, which is I think some people do try and argue, but those last reps are definitely the most important. And it just seems to be for hypertrophy, the more sets you can do close to failure, the more failure points you get, which myo reps is increasing the number of reps close to failure, the more you can grow, assuming you can recover from it.
Yes. Yeah. That's good. That's good. I'm going to ask you 2 quick questions and you can give them rapid fire and we'll wrap this up. Really appreciate your time, man, for jumping on. Like somebody probably thinking about like, dude, you talked about prep and you didn't even say anything about cardio. That's my bad because I didn't ask it. What what's your take on like using cardio? Does it change much in when you're moving towards prep? Is it overused? What's your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I would say in general, I get the. I don't know if it's overused. I don't know. From my perspective, I think it's appropriately used. I think most people understand it. And the way I kind of think of it is it's just burning energy. It's not special. It's not going to help with fat loss apart from helping you get into an energy deficit. So for most of my clients, I prefer to focus on just step counts and then their weight training and just the amount of calories they're consuming through their food. Now, some people, they don't have the time to get many steps in, and then we do low intensity, steady state cardio, and we might do some, but it's basically, it's just to burn calories. There's nothing specially fat burning about it. I would recommend people don't do high intensity interval training
And
for it. I have tried that
was that the
during
fatigue
a comp
reason?
prep.
Too much fatigue?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just too similar to your weight training and can impact that. And that's what's keeping the muscle is the weight training. You don't want to take away recovery reserves for that. But steps, low intensity, steady state, that's not really going to hurt your recovery from your weight training. So it's just a way of like, hey, it's like turning on your car and running the battery just stationary in your like drive to kind of waste the battery.
Yeah. Oh, I like that analogy. That's good. So, last question I have for you is on post show recovery. And you said something that I wanted you to elaborate on. It was a post you made. You said the worst application of reverse dieting is for the bodybuilder who has finished their contest season. And then you talked about prolonging a state of red S. Maybe you could explain what that is. And then you said
Yep.
something you only want to be in when absolutely necessary when competing. So, like, maybe elaborate on what does it look like for post competition, and what do you mean by this reverse dieting? Because this is really fascinating to me.
Cool. So as I framed it before, when you're in this low uh, body fat, you are below your lower intervention point and you're in a calorie deficit. So you're in a relative energy deficit. Basically, you're really lean, so you haven't got much fat on you, and you're not taking in much calories. So that leads to all the symptoms of red S, which are like lower immunity, poor digestion, low energy levels, poor mood states, hampered hormones, all the things we spoke about before, those diet fatigue symptoms, poor sleep, hanger,
Yeah.
all that stuff, which isn't good. You don't want to be there, and which is why outside of photo shoot or competition, don't diet down to this point because it's not a great place to be. So in the past, people would reverse, just like you were kind of bring calories down slowly towards the show, people would bring calories up slowly post show. This was reverse dieting, and the application was like literally 5 or 10 grams of carbohydrates. Now, I don't even think people can be precise enough. Maybe bodybuilders could at that stage of prep, but your Gen Pop person definitely ain't precise enough to know that they're only adding 5 to 10 grams of carbohydrates. Labeling errors on foods, people just aren't that good at actually measuring and tracking their food. But it was like this very slow trickle up of food. But if you add 5 to 10 grams of carbs, a small amount of calories, you're still in a calorie deficit. So you're still holding on to these symptoms. And so you're just extending this unhealthy position for longer. And so week by week, you're just in this position of relative energy deficit with all these symptoms holding on. And sure, you're leaner and you're eating a bit more, but what for? What good is this physique if you're not stepping on stage or doing a photo shoot? You're just staying lean for the sake of staying lean. We can't ameliorate these symptoms until we add body fat and get into a good energy state. And you can't rush on body fat and expect to feel fully recovered. There's a time component as well. But that was the old application of reverse dieting. And so I think the worst situation to try and do that is, again, keeping someone in a deficit when they're already super lean, especially for women. And if they've lost their menstrual cycle, because now you're putting them in a position of like osteoporosis risk. And obviously, this is also a time where you're extending probably a poor relationship with food because you're still having to be super strict and rigid. So I see that as the worst application of a reverse diet. A better situation would be someone's ended a diet. They're still maybe like, hey, I want to stay pretty lean, but I want a bit more energy. And if I lost a bit more body fat, I'd be cool with that. Okay, maybe you just slowly, you're like, right, just have a couple more 100 calories this week or 100 calories more this week. It's like, oh, nice. I can have another slice of bread with my dinner. And they're fine because they've still got enough energy. They're not below their lower intervention point, they're hormonally healthy and fine. But to do it to a bodybuilder, once they have done competing, dude, get them up into a surplus, get them adding some body fat, go through what the 3DMJ guys have called a recovery diet. Don't binge your face off, don't go aggressive. And that's kind of where the reverse diet came from. Is post-show, people would have heard of this. You've probably seen bodybuilders doing this, where they're shredded, they're like lifting up their shirt with all their abs, eating like a huge pizza, and they binge their face off, but they rebound bad. And this is just as unhealthy, where they pack on basically all the fat they lost, but more in a like few weeks' time. That's a bad position.
Yes.
The reverse diet was kind of the counter to that, but it was taken again to another extreme, middle ground. You want to have a surplus, but not a crazy surplus. Add some body fat, not tons of body fat. And my general recommendation is like anywhere from 5 to 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Get about 5 to 10% above your stage weight. And then that's kind of the main recovery done. And then you're slowly off into your off season.
That's interesting because like, so I do for all my clients, and again, this is not in a bodybuilding context, we'll do a reverse diet. So like the diet after the diet kind of idea. And normally they will actually, like, say, like I had a lady get down to like 130 for her weight. That was her goal weight. And then we did the reverse diet. In the next couple of weeks, she actually lost and got down to 127 before she started to level out and then maybe gain a little bit back. And it's been a pretty significant trend that I've seen with all my clients. They usually still, because obviously they're still in a caloric deficit, so it makes sense. You're saying for a bodybuilder who's at a really low percentage, they're like basically kind of metabolically not healthy at this point. For them to do that slow of a pace is not a good idea. Get them back up. And there's, like you're saying, there's no reason to stay exotically lean unless you're going to another show or another like a photo shoot or something like that. That makes sense. That totally makes sense. That's really some really good nuance there. Man, this has been so good. We should wrap this up. You're one of those guys I feel like I just could talk to for hours and hours, and
that's
I'm
awesome.
not going to presume any more upon
that.
your time, but this has been fantastic. Steve, thank you for joining the channel and having this conversation.
Thank you so much for the invite. Hopefully people enjoyed it just as much as I did. And I'd be down for doing another one in future if you wanted to, but I appreciate being invited on.
Dude, totally. Last thing I'll say, do you have, I'm sure there might be some people in our audience that might be looking to train for a bodybuilding competition. Do you have any room for clients at this time? How could people reach out to you? It's the best way.
Yeah, for sure. So revivestronger.com is our website. You can find coaching on there. We've got a bit of a team. So there's me and 2 other coaches. And yeah, we definitely have capacity to take on competitors and would love to take people to stage if that's what they're interested in.
That's great. I will link your website in the show notes here. And also, hey, maybe sometime I'll hit you up if you have a spot available.
Yeah.
2026, I'm thinking about doing it. Maybe you could convince me. No, you're probably like, dude, if you're not convinced, I'm not working with you. But
true.
For me, I want to do it. For me, it's more of like, you probably can relate with this as a business owner. It's just like, is this the time that I can really just commit to? Because I know it's going to be 100% like commitment to it. I definitely know that I want to get a coach for that stage instead of trying to do it myself. So that'd be cool.
Yeah, first time, it's great having someone in your corner to bounce ideas off and to help you navigate just all the new territory. But once you've done it once, now at least you've got that experience with what it feels like, what to expect. There's just so much self-doubt that can happen when you're like, I don't know if we should turn left or right at this point because it's a journey I've never traveled.
Yeah, 100%. Well, man, thanks again for being on the channel, and we'll let you go. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Cheers.